Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me to the next Ranger guide on Black Desert Online's Ranger class. My name is Wilkie, and today we're going to talk about itemization and gear for your Ranger. Now, a note beforehand, this is pretty much only valid before media update or any future content update that will release new parts of gear. So, depending on whenever they will release new stuff, that item choice may not be the best one you can make right now. But up to this point, as the current patch we're currently using, this is probably the best item choice you can make. However, there still is a lot of variety going on, so I'll try to explain a few things here and there. I'll try to make some nodes maybe on the screen. But basically, yeah, we can use my itemization, I guess. Now we're gonna start with the main hand. Now, as you can see, I currently use a longbow, a Uriah longbow of destruction. Now, destruction basically only means I get the extra effect of 1 attack speed because I made it blue. That's something I may cover in a different guide, how to get it and what to get. But basically, you can see me wielding a plus 15 Uriah weapon at this point. So, no, I don't have a Leverito yet, because unfortunately I was not able to snipe one when I had the chances to. Each time I tried to grab one, I didn't get one. But basically what I'm trying to tell you is Uriah longbow, or basically any Uriah weapon, works perfectly fine at this patch notes. If you can afford Leverito and you can afford to get it to plus 15, because it's going to be a lot more expensive than getting a Uriah to plus 15. But if you have the funds to do so, I'd recommend go for a Leverito, but as a starter weapon, Uriah works perfectly fine. It is probably one of the best weapons you can use for PvP, and it's still reasonably priced. So even if you don't have that many funds or that much money, you should still be able to get your Uriah weapon to plus 15 in I guess a couple days, depending on how much you farm and depending on how much money you already have. Basically, the order in which I would rank these is, if you're rich enough and it's not your first character and you can afford it, get a Leverito. If you don't, go for Yuri instead, and then try to work your way onwards to a Leverito. Maybe you've been one of the lucky people who actually got it as a drop from the weekly bosses. In that case, it's pretty obvious. Put all your money into that weapon instead and don't bother with Uriah. But for most people, Uriah is going to be the choice of weapon. Now, the offhand. This is kind of a bit tricky, because you can see that I also have the bronze dagger lying in my inventory, but it's not enhanced. So I'll come to that really quickly. Basically, the reason why I use a steel dagger over a bronze dagger is because I use both Callus necklace and Callus belt in order to boost my accuracy a bit higher. That pretty much allows me to PvP quite freely. Against 54s, I have no trouble at all hitting them. Against 55s, occasionally I see that I can miss, but not that terribly much, so it's not really a big issue for me because I'm 54 at this point. However, if you're lower level and you're going up against higher level in PvP, higher level I mean like at least a gap of 2 levels or even more, you should definitely opt into the bronze dagger instead and try to ramp up your accuracy. Maybe even use food to boost up your accuracy even further. Because if you're not gonna hit an enemy, it doesn't matter how much damage you're potentially able to deal, because you will not hit them. So if you can afford the steel dagger in terms of you don't need the accuracy to grind or PvP, go for the steel dagger. If you need more accuracy, go for the bronze dagger. Basically what you will want to have at some point is keep both steel dagger and bronze dagger in your inventory, so you can pretty much switch freely. They aren't really heavy. It's 6, I guess, pounds, or 4.5 pounds for the bronze dagger, so it's not really an issue with weight. And it's only one slot it's gonna take up. So definitely try to get both of these early on into the game, and just switch to whatever weapon you need. Pretty much at whatever point in time. If you feel like you're grinding and you have trouble hitting mobs, switch to bronze dagger. If you're hitting mobs that aren't purple or red anymore, for example like white or even green, you can pretty safely use the steel dagger instead. So that is pretty much all about main and offhand. There is not really any other choice for range right now. Steel dagger or bronze dagger, I'd say get both and upgrade both eventually, but it's certainly not something I would be focusing a lot of energy onto. Now, going from weapons to armor, this is probably the most talked about topic next to the bronze and steel dagger discussion. Basically, in my opinion at least, you have two options you could be rolling. Now, the first option is pretty much what you're seeing on my screen and my equipment, is I use a Zereth helmet with the Zereth shoes. And what that gives me is, if you look at the two-piece set effect, it gives me a total of 200 endurance. In total, with the shoe bonus, I get 400 endurance and 15 knockdown and bound resistance through the helmet. But the real reason you really want to use 2 Zereth parts instead of only 1 is to get the additional 200 endurance, which basically translate into like 2-3 dashes, maybe even 4, which basically allows you to deal more damage, keep more mobility up, and allows you to remain in combat a lot, well, not a lot longer, but it allows you to retain your combat mobility longer than any ranger who does not have this item build. Now, for the chest and the gloves, I use heavy or heave. I'm not exactly sure what people actually call these. I call them heave parts. Basically, if you look at the two-piece set effect, 2 parts of heave armor will grant you a whooping 250 HP bonus, which is not only making us less squishy, but if you haven't noticed by now, a few skills and also a few awakenings, but namely Blasting Gust and Penetrating Wind. If you look at the very bottom above the orange text, it says add 10% of max HP as extra damage. So this is pretty straightforward, right? The more HP you get, also the more damage you will be able to deal. So not only will we get a bit less squishy, so we get a bit more survivability, we will also be able to deal more damage at the same time. So definitely get at least 2 heave parts, because 250 HP is a very nice boost to have. Now, the other thing about the heave parts is they come with 2 gem slots, which allows you to combine a lot more possibilities. As you can see on my gems right now, I will cover the gems after talking all of the equipments through, but basically heave gets you 2 slots over 1 slot. That allows you to basically combine multiple stats or adjust your build to your needs. Yeah, that is, like I said, the first option. This is my personal preference because I like having more endurance over a little more HP. The second choice, and that is pretty viable as well, is instead of the Zereth helmet, you would be using a heave helmet. Now that would mean you would lose 200 endurance for the 2-piece set effect of the Zereth armor, but instead you would be getting the 50 HP from this 3-piece set effect, plus 2 slots over 1 slot in the helmet, which potentially could give you another 50 HP boost, because in the helmet you will usually get or go for the 50 HP gem. Right now I currently have luck in mine because I want to have max luck. But if you were to go for heave helmet instead of Zereth helmet, you'd basically opt in for more HP, less knockdown resistance, and less endurance. So basically it's a trade-off between, do you want more endurance and a bit higher knockdown resistance, or do you want more HP, which is a tad bit more damage as well, but not being able to dash as much around. So that is pretty much the only 2 choices I recommend going. There might be people who use Aegirian armor, there's even some people who use Talus boots. I have a Talus shoe in my inventory as well, and the reason is that they give 2 movement speeds, so whenever I run somewhere not on my horse, I simply switch that out. But that is really the only reason I have that in my inventory. For anything else, I really only recommend going either 2 Zereth, 2 heave, which is the current setup I use, or 3 heave and Zereth shoes. Zereth shoes give you the 200 endurance flat on because of their bonus. So this is pretty much one of the item parts you will always want to use in the current patch. Yeah, that is, I think, pretty much everything about armor I can say. About the accessories, this is pretty much a no-brainer. For rings and earrings, go for damage. I use Mark of Shadow. If you cannot afford witch's earrings or micro shadow. You can see this one is called Earring of Sealed Magical Power. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be guides around on how to get those. That is pretty much a quest and an endurance reward. If you do, I think, 15 hourly quests, you can get one of these earrings from the quest with a 100% chance. So this is really only an endurance test. If you don't have the money or the luck to get any of these, get these instead first, and then try to build your way into the real ones or try to upgrade them. Now, for the belt, if you're lucky enough and you can get the Tree Spirit belt, go for that one. As I mentioned earlier, since I prefer accuracy over raw damage, I switched into the Callus build. The other reason is I basically haven't been lucky, so I did not get the Tree Spirit belt yet. And right now I think the average price clocks in around 30 million, which is, well, I could technically afford it, but I just don't want to, simply because I'm not sure if 5 damage is actually worth so much cash right now. And for the necklace, basically you have 3 options. If you're one of the lucky few people or the very rich ones who can afford the ogre rings, it's arguably the best damage necklace you can get. Even on the Korean server, which the Valencia update, which is the desert, they have no better necklace in terms of AP than the ogre ring. So getting an ogre ring is pretty much one of the few items you will most likely never change in the near future. Maybe at some point, but even right now, nothing beats the ogre necklace in terms of raw AP. Since basically again I don't have that, I use a Callus necklace instead because I opted in for the steel dagger. If I were to use an ogre ring, or the third alternative is an upgraded bearer's necklace, which comes very close to an ogre ring, I'd probably use my bronze dagger instead. But this is pretty much a personal choice of combining accuracy, or basically getting so much accuracy that you can safely hit enemies and mobs. And once you're at that point where you don't miss at all, or very rarely, you can start building AP on anything else. But like I said, in terms of earrings and rings, go for AP as a ranger. There's no point trying to get anything else. Belt, if you can, Tree Spirit belt. If not, I recommend the Callus belt. And for necklace, same thing. If you can't afford the ogre ring or you're lucky to get one, use that. If you need more damage, go for an upgraded bearer's necklace instead. If you need more accuracy, go for an upgraded Callus necklace instead. I think that is pretty much all I can talk about the overall gear a ranger could wear. Let's go quickly over the gems. Now for the gems, we're wanting to open this little thingy here. If you look at enhancements here, you can see me having attack speed 5. Now the thing is, this is your main priority you will want to get as a ranger, and probably most other classes as well. But specifically for ranger, max attack speed first. Now, there's multiple ways to do it. The way I did it is probably not the most efficient one, but it works for me, and it is somehow cheap, I guess, because I can replace parts of my armor very easily without having to worry about too much money lost. But basically your first goal is to get attack speed 5. Now, basically, since we use heave gloves, we have 2 slots in gloves. Now you can see I have one glove which grants me 1 attack speed, and I have a second one which grants me 2 attack speed. So the reason is why I'm not using two gems with 2 attack speed instead is because I made my Uriah to blue, which grants me an additional attack speed. Now I could opt into 1 crit in my weapon instead of getting the attack speed, so I would get to 5 attack speed and 1 crit, but I think reading up upon guides, the first stage or the first level of critical hit rate is only like 3% critical hit rate, which is not something I really consider worth having. So unless you really want to min-max stats using a Uriah weapon, what I would do is go for 4 attack speed on the gloves, make this a crit effect instead of an attack speed, and use the gem that grants both 1 crit and 1 attack speed. That way you can very easily get 2 crit and 5 attack speed as well. So that would, I think, boost you to like 5 or 6% crit rate, which still isn't insanely much, but it is something at least. And compared to my 0 critical hit rate, you probably have a better overall damage output. So basically for gloves, go attack speed. For the weapon, complement either crit or attack speed, so you get to 5 attack speed. Anything you have in surplus, put it into crit. Now, for the offense, basically you have two options. One is a critical gem that increases the critical damage, or if you don't have it or don't want to afford it, just go for a +1 luck gem. That way you can easily get more luck, which will help you farming and getting more loot in the whole process. Let's go over to the shoes. Basically, you have two choices here. The first one you can see here is I socketed 25% knockdown and bound resistance. If you're not really a fan of that gem, go for 2 movement speed instead. That'll allow you to be, well, not a lot faster, but it will allow you to move faster around the battlefield, chase enemies more easily, escape more easily, and overall boost your speed in whatever you're doing without your horse. Let's see, we have the helmet. Like, as I said, the helmet, usually you will want to go for 50 HP in the helmet, since I prefer having 5 luck at the current state, because I pretty much farm quite a lot. I opted in for another luck +1 gem instead of the 50 HP. If I were to have another source to get my luck to +5, I'd certainly use the 50 HP gem. And for the chest, that is pretty much the only choice you really want to get. Is you will want to get max HP 120 weight limit, basically giving you additional 200 HP, which said initially boosts not only your survivability, but also your damage. Yeah, I think that is pretty much all I can talk about equipment right now and stats in general. I think that one is a bit longer than the others, but unfortunately that is how it works, and basically I'm trying to give you as many information as possible to actually decide on your own what build you actually want to roll and adjust the items to your personal needs. Anyways, if you need something else, if something is kind of confusing or I missed something, correct me or just leave a comment below so I can answer that in the future as well. Anyways, hopefully you'll learn something about gearing your ranger. As I said in the video at the beginning, this is pre-Mediah. Once we get new updates, once we get new items, this will change slightly or drastically depending on what type of gear we will be able to get. But at the current patch we're playing, you basically have the options I mentioned in this video. Anyways, have a good one and see you next time.